The lavish Montero mansion was alive with celebration. Arthur Montero, the evening's host, stood confidently among his affluent guests, basking in the glow of admiration and indulgence. Conversations buzzed, champagne flowed, and egos thrived in the extravagant setting. Among the guests was Thomas Serrano, a man known for his sharp wit and love of stirring trouble. With a sly smile, he approached Arthur, swirling the wine in his glass. "Arthur," he drawled, amusement lacing his tone. "You always claim that money can buy and change anything, that with the right price, everything in this world is malleable." Arthur arched an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Isn't it true? Money is the most powerful tool there is. With it, there are no limits." Thomas tilted his head, pretending to consider the statement. "It's easy to say that here, surrounded by people who only tell you what you want to hear. But can you prove it?" A hush fell over the group. Curiosity piqued. Arthur set his glass down, crossing his arms. "And how exactly do you expect me to prove something so obvious?" Thomas smirked. "I'll bet you $5 million that you can't marry someone outside of our world, a woman who doesn't fit your standards of beauty or status. And more than that, you have to stay married for 3 months, make it believable, and completely transform her." Laughter rippled through the room as guests leaned in, eager for Arthur's reaction. Arthur let out a short, humorless chuckle. "You can't be serious, Thomas. Me? Married to someone who doesn't fit my standards? That's so absurd, it doesn't even deserve a response." Ignoring the initial rejection, Thomas casually scanned the room, and his gaze landed on Maria, a maid quietly carrying a tray of champagne glasses. Her hair was neatly pulled back into a bun, her uniform crisp and clean. She carried herself with quiet humility, her eyes focused on her task. Thomas grinned, nodding in her direction. "What about her? Your maid. She's certainly not your type, perfect for the challenge." Arthur followed Thomas's gaze and frowned. "You must be joking. Me? Marry a maid? That's beyond ridiculous." "Why not?" Thomas countered, his smile taunting. "If money truly buys everything, this should be easy for you. Or are you afraid you'll lose the bet?" The room tensed, waiting for Arthur's response. The challenge struck at his pride, and backing down now would be unthinkable. After a moment of silence, Arthur picked up his glass, took a slow sip, then smirked. "Deal, 3 months with her, and I'll prove to you that there's no challenge I can't conquer." Excited murmurs filled the air. Thomas extended his hand, and Arthur shook it firmly, sealing the wager. "This is going to be entertaining," Thomas remarked, his tone laced with amusement. "But remember, you have to make it look real. I want to see her at your side at events, dressed like a high society lady. If you fail, I'll be $5 million richer." Arthur's gaze darkened. "I never fail, Thomas. Get ready to open your wallet." The next morning, Maria was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she found Arthur Montero standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on her. "Mr. Montero?" she asked, puzzled. "Do you need something?" "Yes, Maria," he replied, stepping forward. "I need to talk to you. It's about a proposal." She frowned in confusion. "A proposal?" Arthur leaned in slightly, choosing his words carefully. To win this bet, he needed to convince Maria. "I want you to marry me." The plate slipped from Maria's hands, crashing into the sink and sending water splashing everywhere. "What?" she gasped. "You heard me?" Arthur replied, his tone as calm as if he were negotiating a business deal. "It's a contract, a marriage of convenience. You'll be my wife for 3 months, and in return, I'll pay you an amount that could change your life." Maria let out a nervous laugh, thinking it had to be a joke. "That's not funny, Mr. Montero." "I'm not joking, Maria." Arthur pulled a check from his pocket and placed it on the counter. The amount was staggering, enough to wipe out any financial burden for years. You're struggling, aren't you? With this money, you could start fresh. Maria looked from the check to Arthur, her mind racing. She knew he was a man who controlled everything around him, who saw people as assets rather than individuals. "Why me?" she asked, trying to understand. "Because you're perfect for it," Arthur said bluntly. "No one would expect me to marry someone like you. That's exactly why it will work." His brutal honesty made her uncomfortable. She wanted to refuse, to walk away from whatever twisted game this was. But the weight of her overdue bills, the pressure of supporting her family, it all pressed down on her. "And after 3 months?" she asked hesitantly. "We get divorced," Arthur said, matter-of-factly. "No questions, no ties. You go back to your life, and I go back to mine. The only difference is, you'll be in a much better position than when you started." Maria took a deep breath. Agreeing to this meant selling a part of herself, stepping into a world where she didn't belong. But maybe, just maybe, it was her only chance to change her reality. "I accept," she finally said. Arthur smiled, satisfied. "Good. Tomorrow, you'll be my wife." Maria watched him walk out of the kitchen, her heart heavy. She knew she was stepping into something dangerous, but for the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer of hope. The next morning, the atmosphere at the Montero mansion felt different. The staff whispered in the hallways, puzzled by Arthur's unusual behavior. He was never one to linger at home, let alone dressed formally so early in the day. For Maria, however, the day had started like any other, cleaning, organizing, staying unnoticed. She was outside in the garden, kneeling as she gathered fallen leaves from an old tree. The scent of damp grass mixed with the fragrance of flowers, and for a fleeting moment, she felt a rare sense of peace. Then, a shadow fell over her. "Maria!" Arthur's voice cut through the tranquility. She stood up quickly, wiping her hands on the edge of her uniform, unintentionally smearing dirt on her apron. When her eyes met Arthur's, she saw something unfamiliar in his expression, determination, and maybe even expectation. "Mr. Montero," she said, trying to steady her nerves. "Everything's ready. We're going to the registry office in an hour." Maria blinked, struggling to process his words. "The registry office? Already?" "Yes. The sooner we start, the better." Arthur slid his hands into his pockets, his tone firm and emotionless. "The documents are prepared. You just need to sign." Maria's heart pounded. Until now, the arrangement had felt distant, like an abstract idea she could still back out of. But now, with the reality of marriage staring her in the face, it felt suffocatingly real. I need more time," she whispered. Maria hesitated. I need more time." Arthur tilted his head, studying her. "Time for what?" "You already agreed, Maria, and I'm not the kind of man who waits." She wanted to refuse, to walk away. But the image of her humble home, her younger siblings' tired faces, and the weight of mounting debts held her back. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "All right," she murmured. "I'm ready." An hour later, Maria sat stiffly in the back of Arthur's sleek black limousine, the luxury of the vehicle making her feel even more out of place. The driver remained silent as he maneuvered through the city, while Arthur sat beside her, focused on his phone, barely acknowledging her presence. She turned to the window, watching the towering buildings and high-end boutiques pass by. This world, with its wealth and privilege, felt like a completely different universe from the one she knew. People here carried themselves with effortless elegance, never once looking around, as if the world revolved only around them. "We're here," Arthur announced suddenly, slipping his phone into his pocket. The car rolled to a stop in front of an understated yet imposing building. Maria hesitated before stepping out, her nerves tightening as Arthur coolly held the door for her. Inside the registry office, a pair of lawyers and a small group of staff waited, their expressions unreadable. It was clear they had been instructed not to ask questions. Maria swallowed hard as she picked up the pen to sign the papers. Her hand trembled slightly, but she forced herself to steady it. In mere minutes, she was no longer just Maria. She was now Mrs. Montero. Arthur shook the registrar's hand and turned to her with a faint smile. "Congratulations, we're officially husband and wife now." Maria barely glanced at him. "It's not exactly like that," she murmured under her breath. Arthur didn't respond. Instead, he simply led her back to the waiting car. The silence between them on the ride home was even heavier than before. When they arrived at the Montero mansion, Maria immediately noticed the changes. The curtains had been replaced, the lighting softened, and elegant new decorations adorned the grand hall. The entire house felt as though it were preparing for an elaborate performance. Arthur led her upstairs and stopped in front of a door. When he pushed it open, Maria's breath caught. The bedroom was nothing short of luxurious. An enormous bed with velvet drapes, an elegant seating area, and a closet larger than her entire home. "This will be your room," Arthur said flatly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Maria stepped inside, taking in the grandeur. Everything in the room, from the polished floors to the intricate details on the furniture, seemed to whisper that she didn't belong here. "It's beautiful," she said uncertainly, unsure of what else to say. Arthur nodded. "I hope you're satisfied. And remember, you're my wife now. It's important that everyone believes it, especially the people in my circle." Maria crossed her arms and turned to face him. "And what exactly do you expect from me, Mr. Montero?" Arthur raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised by her defiance. He was used to being obeyed without question, but Maria wasn't making this easy. "I expect you to play the role," he said firmly. "Elegant dresses, perfect posture, no impulsive behavior." Maria let out a dry laugh. "Oh, of course. Because appearances are all that matter in your world, aren't they?" Arthur frowned, but didn't respond. She wasn't wrong, but he wouldn't admit it. "You'll have everything you need," he said instead. "Tomorrow morning, a stylist will arrive to help you choose the appropriate wardrobe." Maria sighed, the weight of the arrangement pressing down on her. She didn't want to accept it, but she knew she was trapped. "Fine," she said. "I'll do my part. But don't expect me to change who I am." Arthur shrugged, as if it didn't matter. "That's your problem, Maria. As long as you stick to the agreement, I don't care who you are." With that, he left the room, leaving her alone in the vast, cold space. She sat at the edge of the bed, feeling small and out of place. Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back. 3 months, she whispered to herself. Just 3 months. Meanwhile, Arthur walked down the stairs, his expression unreadable. His mind was already calculating his next move in the bet. Yet, something about Maria unsettled him. She wasn't like anyone else in his life, and that fact alone irritated him. The game had begun, but neither of them was prepared for the twist that fate had in store. The next morning, Maria was awakened by a soft knock at the door. Before she could respond, the door swung open, and an elegant woman in a perfectly tailored suit stepped inside with confident strides. Behind her, 2 assistants carried a rack full of luxurious dresses. "Good morning, Mrs. Montero," the woman said with a professional smile. "My name is Clara, and your husband hired me to help you dress appropriately for upcoming events." Still sitting on the bed, Maria blinked in confusion. "Upcoming events?" Clara nodded as she began arranging the elegant dresses around the room. "Yes, Mr. Montero believes appearance is essential, especially for someone in your position. That's why he's ordered a complete wardrobe for you." Maria scoffed as she slowly stood up. "Is this really necessary?" Clara paused in her organizing, turning to Maria with a composed expression. "With all due respect, ma'am, necessary or not, it's what he wants. I suggest you make the most of it." Maria wanted to argue, but she knew it would be pointless. Practicality won. "Fine, let's just get this over with." Clara smiled approvingly. "Excellent choice." For the next few hours, Maria was fitted and styled, the assistants discussing fabrics and designs as if she were merely a mannequin. She felt like a stranger in her own skin, but as she glanced at herself in the mirror, she realized something. No amount of expensive clothing could truly change who she was. No matter how much they dressed her up, she didn't belong in this world. When she finally descended the stairs, Arthur was seated in the grand hall, casually leaning back in a leather armchair with a tablet in his hands. As soon as he looked up, he silently examined her from head to toe. "Not bad," he commented with an indifference that irritated her. "Thanks, I guess," Maria muttered, crossing her arms. Arthur stood and adjusted his tie, ignoring her sarcasm. "We have an event tonight, a dinner with some of my associates. It's important that you're prepared." Maria narrowed her eyes. "A dinner? And when exactly were you planning to tell me about this?" "Now," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Maria sighed, already exhausted by his attitude. "Fine, but don't expect me to pretend to be someone I'm not, Arthur." He gave a small, knowing smirk. "As long as you don't embarrass me, that's all that matters." The dinner was held at a prestigious restaurant, known for its exclusivity and lavish decor. The moment Arthur and Maria stepped inside, all eyes turned toward them. Arthur carried himself with his usual confidence, unbothered by the attention, while Maria did her best to ignore the curious stares that followed her. At the table, Thomas was already waiting along with two other men who had been involved in the bet. The moment Maria took her seat, Thomas flashed a smirk. "So, this is the famous Mrs. Montero?" he said, his tone dripping with mockery. Maria felt her face heat, but she kept her composure. "Yes, that's me," Thomas chuckled. "I have to admit, Arthur, you've really outdone yourself this time." Arthur shot Thomas a cold glare, but didn't respond. He knew that any reaction would only encourage his so-called friends to push further. Maria, however, had no intention of sitting there silently. She met Thomas's gaze and, with a sweet yet sharp tone, asked, "And you, Thomas? Do you always spend so much time judging other people's lives?" The table fell silent. Thomas choked on his wine, while the others chuckled discreetly. Even Arthur looked at Maria, mildly surprised, but saying nothing. There was something about her, strength and defiance, even in the face of ridicule. He hadn't expected that. The rest of the dinner continued with surface-level conversations, but Maria could feel the scrutiny from Arthur's friends. Every movement, every word she spoke was being assessed. It was as if she were on display. Still, she refused to let them see any discomfort. By the time they left the restaurant, Maria exhaled deeply as she settled into the car. "That was interesting," she murmured, staring out the window. Arthur leaned forward slightly, watching her. "You handled it well." Maria turned to him, surprised by the unexpected compliment. "Thanks, I guess." Arthur gave a half smile, but remained silent. For the first time, he realized he had underestimated Maria, and that unsettled him. In the days that followed, Maria gradually adjusted to life in the mansion. Despite feeling out of place, she carried herself with dignity. The household staff, who had initially regarded her with skepticism, began to respect her humility and quiet strength. Meanwhile, Arthur watched everything from a distance. He was a man used to controlling every aspect of his life, but Maria was different. She was a puzzle he hadn't quite figured out yet. One night, as he sat in his office reviewing documents, he couldn't shake the feeling that this arrangement was turning out to be far more unpredictable than he had anticipated. While reviewing documents in his office, Arthur heard the sound of light footsteps approaching. He looked up to see Maria standing at the door, holding a cup of tea. "You look like you need a break," she said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Arthur raised an eyebrow, surprised by her boldness. "And you think you can tell me what to do?" Maria shrugged and placed the cup on his desk. "It doesn't hurt to try." Arthur hesitated for a moment before picking up the cup, inhaling the scent of fresh herbs. It was a simple gesture, but strangely thoughtful. "Thanks," he muttered. Maria sat down in one of the chairs across from him, her gaze drifting over the scattered papers. "You work a lot." "Someone has to," he replied curtly. Maria offered a small smile. "Even so, you should take a break sometimes." Arthur studied her, intrigued. There was something about her simplicity, her directness, that unsettled him. She reminded him of something distant, something he had long since pushed aside. "You're different," he said, before he could stop himself. Maria tilted her head slightly. "Different? How?" Arthur shook his head as if trying to dismiss the thought. "I don't know, just different." Maria laughed softly. "I guess I'll take that as a compliment." She stood up, ready to leave, but paused at the door to glance back at him. "Good night, Arthur." Arthur held her gaze for a moment before replying, "Good night, Maria." As the door closed behind her, he leaned back in his chair, still holding the teacup. For the first time in a long while, he felt an odd sense of peace, though he couldn't quite explain why. The next morning, Arthur summoned Maria to the backyard garden, where an unexpected scene awaited her. Under the shade of a massive oak tree, a long table had been elegantly set. It was covered with books, fine silverware, crystal glasses, and a small notepad. Standing nearby was Clara, her ever-formal stylist, wearing her usual professional smile. But beside her stood an older woman with graceful poise, her silver hair neatly styled, exuding authority. Maria frowned as she approached, sensing something was about to change. Arthur turned to her, his tone neutral. "Maria, this is Esther," he said, gesturing toward the older woman. Maria glanced at her warily. "She's an etiquette and manners specialist," Arthur continued. "Starting today, you'll be having daily lessons with her. You need to learn how to carry yourself in your new position." Maria crossed her arms, glancing between Arthur and Esther. It was clear he expected her to play a role, a perfect, polished version of the wife he wanted the world to see. And, whether she liked it or not, the lessons were about to begin. Maria frowned. "Etiquette lessons? Are you serious?" "Completely serious," Arthur responded, crossing his arms and giving her a look that dared her to challenge him. "You need to know how to present yourself at the events I attend. We can't afford mistakes." Maria let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Of course, because nothing is more important than impressing the right people, right?" "Exactly," he replied without a hint of irony. "Let's begin." Maria knew she had no real choice in this arrangement, but that didn't mean she had to make it easy for him. With a dramatic sigh, she sat at the table, crossing her arms. "All right then, teach me how to be perfect." The first few lessons were a true test of patience, for both of them. Esther, with her impeccable posture and unshakable composure, demonstrated how to hold a wine glass, use the correct utensils, and walk with elegance. Maria, however, found amusement in making small, deliberate mistakes just to see Arthur's reaction. "Maria," Esther said with a controlled sigh after Maria accidentally dropped her fork for the third time. "You need to focus." "I'm trying," Maria replied, flashing a mischievous smile. Arthur, watching from across the room, narrowed his eyes. "Maria, you know this is necessary." "For whom?" she shot back. "You? Because I'm perfectly fine the way I am." "It's necessary for both of us," Arthur said firmly. "I don't make bets to lose." Maria scoffed, but picked up the fork again. Despite her rebellious attitude, part of her wanted to prove something, not to please Arthur, but to show him that he didn't have the power to define who she was. As the days passed, Maria started to notice subtle changes in her routine. The etiquette lessons became less frustrating as she got the hang of the basics. However, her relationship with Arthur remained tense. One evening during dinner, Arthur watched her closely, clearly waiting for her to make a mistake. Aware of his scrutiny, Maria deliberately placed her knife and fork on her plate with perfect precision, then looked up and met his gaze. "Are you satisfied?" she asked, her tone edged with defiance. Arthur smirked slightly. "I'll admit, you're improving." "Well, I'm a dedicated student," Maria replied, with mock seriousness. Despite the teasing tone, something between them shifted that night. For the first time, Arthur seemed to see her as more than just an inconvenience or a challenge. She wasn't simply playing a role, she was stronger and sharper than he had assumed. The next morning, Arthur took Maria to her first true test in high society, a charity brunch hosted by one of his business partners, Clarice Belmont. Dressed in an elegant blue gown chosen by Clara, Maria entered the grand venue beside Arthur, feeling every pair of eyes turned toward her. Though she felt out of place, she lifted her chin, refusing to let her nerves show. Clarice, a sophisticated woman with a commanding presence, approached them with a polished smile. "Arthur, darling," she greeted before turning her keen gaze to Maria. "And who is this lovely lady?" Arthur's smile was tight, his tone carefully measured. "This is my wife, Maria." Clarice raised an eyebrow, the surprise flickering in her eyes before she quickly masked it with a charming smile. Extending her hand, she said, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Maria." Arthur never mentioned he was married. Maria returned the handshake, fully aware that the woman's words were more of a calculated remark than a genuine welcome. "The pleasure is mine," she replied smoothly. Throughout the brunch, Maria noticed the way guests subtly observed her, as if trying to decipher how someone like her had ended up with a man like Arthur. Instead of feeling intimidated, she let it fuel her. When Clarice asked her opinion on philanthropy, Maria didn't give the expected, polished answer. "I think helping others shouldn't be limited to events like this," she said, her tone calm but direct. Arthur, mid-sip of his drink, glanced at her. The room grew noticeably quieter, a few guests exchanging glances, but Maria didn't flinch. She was done playing by the rules. "It's something we can all do in our daily lives," Maria continued, her voice steady. "Even in small ways." Her response caught everyone off guard. Arthur, who had been prepared to step in and deflect attention, paused, watching as the guests exchanged surprised glances. Clarice tilted her head, intrigued. "An interesting perspective," she said, raising her glass. "Arthur, it seems your wife has much to teach us all." Maria felt a mix of pride and relief. For the first time, she had managed to hold her own in this unfamiliar world. Back at the mansion, Arthur stopped in the hallway and turned to Maria. "You were impressive today," he said simply. Maria raised an eyebrow, surprised by the unexpected praise. "Is that a compliment?" Arthur gave a faint smirk. "Yes, you managed to win people over, even though you're nothing like them." Maria chuckled, crossing her arms. "Maybe it's because I'm not trying to be like them." Arthur studied her for a moment, as if seeing her in a new light. "Maybe that's what makes them so intrigued by you." Maria glanced away, suddenly uneasy with his tone. "I just said what I thought was right." Arthur nodded. "Keep it up, Maria." Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. She stood there for a moment, watching him disappear up the stairs. For the first time, she felt she was beginning to understand Arthur. Beneath the cold, calculated exterior, there was something else. Something he kept hidden from everyone, even himself. As the weeks passed, The forced cohabitation between Maria and Arthur began to reveal unexpected layers. Despite their constant teasing and power struggles, Arthur couldn't help but notice that Maria carried a quiet burden. One night, he found her sitting alone in the mansion's garden. The cool night air rustled the leaves as she sat on a stone bench, absent-mindedly flipping through a small notebook. A melancholy expression crossed her face. "It's late," Arthur said, announcing his presence. Maria startled slightly, quickly closing the notebook. "I couldn't sleep." "Neither could I," he admitted, stepping closer. "What are you reading?" "It's just something of mine," she answered evasively, tucking the notebook away. Arthur sensed her hesitation and decided not to press further, but his curiosity had been piqued. That notebook held something important, something he wanted to understand. The next day, while Maria was busy helping in the kitchen, Arthur sat in his office, his thoughts divided between the reports on his desk and the image of her in the garden. He didn't know why, but that little notebook intrigued him more than he wanted to admit. Shortly after lunch, when Maria was still downstairs, he found himself walking toward her room. He hesitated for a moment before opening the door, but his curiosity won. On the dresser, next to a vase of wilted flowers, sat the notebook. Carefully, he picked it up and flipped through the pages. What he found surprised him. Notes and sketches filled the pages, almost like a diary. Some contained delicate doodles of flowers and landscapes, while others held fragmented thoughts and reflections. One page in particular caught his attention. A simple drawing of two small children holding hands with a woman. Beneath it, a handwritten note. "I promised to protect them, no matter the cost." Arthur frowned. Who were these children? He had never heard Maria mention siblings. Or were they her children? That evening, during dinner, Arthur couldn't shake his unease. He watched Maria closely, as if trying to unravel the mystery she carried. Finally, she set down her fork and met his gaze. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Arthur ignored her question. "Do you have siblings?" Maria froze for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Arthur replied, his expression unreadable. Maria averted her gaze, clearly uncomfortable. "I have two younger brothers. They're fine, or at least, I hope they are." "You don't talk to them?" She sighed, placing her fork down. "There's not much to say. It's been years since we've been in touch. They live with an aunt in another city." Arthur noticed the bitterness in her voice, but chose not to push further. He could tell there was more to the story, but he knew patience was key if he wanted answers. A few days later, while Maria was out with Clara, Arthur called his trusted assistant, Marcos, into his office. "I want you to find out everything you can about Maria," he said, handing over a photograph. Marcos hesitated. "Anything specific, Mr. Montero?" "Family. Past anything she might be hiding." Arthur avoided looking directly at his assistant, a slight pang of guilt creeping in for what he was doing. "Understood," Marcos said. "I'll report back soon." The next morning, a thick dossier landed on Arthur's desk. He flipped through the pages in silence, absorbing every detail. Maria had grown up in a modest neighborhood, taking care of her younger brothers from a young age. Their parents had died in a car accident when she was 17, leaving her as their sole caretaker. For years, she had worked tirelessly, juggling multiple jobs just to keep them afloat. But eventually, the courts ruled that she couldn't provide a stable home, and custody was given to an aunt. Arthur felt a strange tightness in his chest as he imagined her facing all of that alone. He had never considered that she might have endured such hardships. Among the documents was an old photograph of Maria with her brothers. She looked so young, holding them protectively in her arms, her eyes filled with hope. That night, Arthur found Maria once again sitting in the garden on the same stone bench. The cool air surrounded them, but she seemed lost in thought, staring at the stars. This time, he approached cautiously and sat beside her. "I need to ask you something," he said directly. Maria turned to him warily. "What is it now? Why have you never mentioned your family?" She pressed her lips together, surprised by the question. "I don't see how that's any of your business." "Maybe it's not," Arthur admitted, his tone softer than usual. "But I know what happened." Maria's eyes widened in alarm. What did you do?" Arthur sighed. "I needed to understand who you really are, Maria. And now I do." She stood abruptly, crossing her arms. "You had no right to dig into my life. My story isn't some game for you to investigate, Arthur." "I'm not playing," he said, standing as well. "I just wanted to understand why you're so guarded, why you don't let anyone in, and now I do. You fought alone for so long that you've convinced yourself you can't trust anyone." Maria shook her head, anger and something deeper flashing in her eyes. "You don't know anything about me." Arthur held her gaze. "I know you lost everything," he said firmly. "And yet, you never gave up. That's more than I can say about most people I know." Maria went silent, staring at the ground. Arthur exhaled, his voice quieter now. "I can't change what happened, but I want you to know that while you're here, you're not alone." Maria looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his words. For the first time, she saw something real in Arthur, something that made her question everything she had assumed about him. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, before turning and heading back inside. Arthur remained in the garden, staring up at the night sky. For the first time in years, he found himself reflecting on something other than business, wealth, or power. For the first time, he was beginning to understand the true value of the people around him. The night air was crisp, and the Montero mansion felt quieter than usual. Maria sat by the window in her room, gazing at the city lights in the distance. The luxury that surrounded her felt hollow. Her conversation with Arthur still echoed in her mind, stirring emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Maria was about to turn off the lights when she heard a soft knock at the door. Frowning in confusion, she stood up and opened it, only to find Arthur standing there. His usual guarded expression was absent, replaced with something more unreadable. "Sorry to bother you so late," he said, hesitating for a moment. "But I need to talk." Maria raised an eyebrow. Arthur never hesitated. Seeing this uncertain side of him piqued her curiosity. "About what?" He exhaled and gestured vaguely. "About us. And this situation?" She stepped aside, allowing him in. Arthur walked into the room, pacing slightly, as if trying to organize his thoughts. Finally, he turned to her, crossing his arms. "I know I pressured you into this arrangement," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "And I know I haven't exactly been kind." Maria tilted her head, surprised by his unusually humble tone. "Is this an apology?" Arthur smirked slightly. "Maybe it is. I'm not very good at this." She crossed her arms, watching him curiously. "Why now?" "Because I've realized you deserve more than what I've offered so far," he said simply, looking straight at her. Maria remained silent, processing his words. It was the first time he seemed genuinely vulnerable. "I never asked for anything, Arthur," she said softly. "I just agreed to the terms of your game." "I know," he responded quickly, "but you still deserve respect, and that's something I've failed to give you." The sincerity in his voice unsettled her. Maria had been carrying so much resentment toward him, yet at that moment, she felt it start to waver, just a little. "Respect is a good start," she finally said. Arthur nodded, relieved. "Can I stay here for a while?" She smirked. "If you promise not to criticize my simple furniture, I suppose you can." A rare, genuine smile crossed Arthur's face. As the night wore on, they found themselves sitting on the floor, sharing a bottle of wine Maria had hidden away. Their conversation flowed more naturally than either had expected. Arthur opened up about his childhood, something he rarely did. He spoke of growing up in a world where emotions were seen as weaknesses and success was the only thing that mattered. "My mother always said love was a distraction," he murmured, swirling the wine in his glass. "She told me relationships are like business deals. You go into them expecting a return." Maria chuckled softly. "That explains a lot." Arthur smirked but looked tired. "Don't be so quick to judge. I know I'm a product of my environment. But sometimes I wonder how things might have been different." Maria studied him for a moment, trying to see past the carefully constructed walls he had built around himself. "You can still change, Arthur." He looked at her, genuinely curious. "You think so?" "I think anyone can change if they want to," she replied with quiet conviction. Arthur's gaze softened. "What about you? If you could change anything, what would it be?" Maria was silent for a moment. Then, her voice barely above a whisper, she admitted, "I wish I had been stronger back then. Maybe my brothers would still be with me if I had fought harder." "Maria," Arthur said, his tone firm, "you did everything you could. You can't blame yourself for that." "That's easy for you to say," she murmured, looking down. Arthur leaned forward slightly, holding her gaze. "You're the strongest person I know, and if no one's ever told you that before, I'm telling you now." Maria felt a lump form in her throat, but she refused to let the tears fall. Instead, she gave him a small, genuine smile. "Thank you, Arthur." In the days that followed, something between them shifted. Their usual exchanges were still filled with sarcasm and playful remarks, but there was now an underlying sense of mutual understanding, of respect. One afternoon, Maria was in the garden, tending to the flowers, when Arthur approached. His expression was more relaxed than usual. "I need your help," he said. Maria turned, surprised. "Help with what?" Arthur exhaled. "I have an important meeting tonight, and I think it would be good if you came with me." She raised an eyebrow. "You want me to attend a business meeting with you?" Arthur nodded. "You're my wife, remember?" Maria chuckled. "I thought that was just to fool your friends." "Maybe," he admitted with a slight smile. "But I think your perspective could be valuable." She paused, considering the situation. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but don't expect me to sit there quietly like some accessory." "I wouldn't expect anything less from you," he replied, amusement flickering in his eyes. That evening, they arrived at the meeting together. Once again, Maria felt the weight of countless eyes on her, but instead of shrinking under their scrutiny, she held her head high, drawing quiet confidence from Arthur's presence beside her. During the discussion, one of the investors raised concerns about the ethical implications of a new project. To everyone's surprise, Maria spoke up. "With all due respect," she began, her voice steady, "I don't believe profit and ethics have to be mutually exclusive. It's possible to achieve financial success without compromising the values that truly matter." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. Arthur, standing beside her, couldn't hide the proud smile that tugged at his lips. The meeting's host, an elderly man in an impeccably tailored suit, nodded thoughtfully. "An interesting perspective, Mrs. Montero. I'd like to hear more." Arthur glanced at Maria, admiration in his eyes. Once again, she had surprised him. Back at the mansion, Maria kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the living room sofa with a sigh. Arthur entered shortly after, hands in his pockets. He watched her for a moment before finally speaking. "You were incredible tonight." Maria looked up at him, a tired smile on her lips. Thank you. I'm not just saying that, he continued. I truly believe you have something special, Maria. She studied him, taken aback by his honesty. Arthur, what's happening to you? He laughed, sitting beside her. Maybe you're changing me. Maria gave a small smile, but didn't respond. Deep down, she knew something between them was shifting, though she wasn't sure what it meant. The days passed quickly, and soon, Arthur decided it was time to introduce Maria to the highest echelons of society. The occasion? The annual Elite Gala, a dazzling event attended by the most powerful names in the country. Maria, however, did not share his enthusiasm. When Arthur first mentioned it over breakfast, she nearly dropped her coffee cup. A gala? She echoed, eyes widening. What do you mean, a gala? It's an important event, Arthur explained casually. And now, as my wife, you'll be the center of attention. Maria crossed her arms. Arthur, I can barely get through formal dinners without wanting to disappear. Do you really think I'll feel comfortable in a room full of people judging my every move? He shrugged. You've already proven you can handle difficult situations. It won't be as bad as you think. She narrowed her eyes. Easy for you to say. You were born into this world. I, on the other hand, am walking in as a target, and you know it. Arthur sighed, rubbing his temple. Yes, they'll judge you, but you don't have to care about that. You're not there to please them. Then why am I going? She challenged. Arthur met her gaze. Because it matters to me. Maria remained silent for a moment. For the first time, Arthur wasn't commanding or forcing. He was asking. All right, she relented. But if anyone insults me, I'm going to respond. Arthur smirked. That's all I expect from you. On the day of the gala, Clara and her team arrived early to prepare Maria. The mansion was transformed into an impromptu atelier with fabrics, jewelry, and makeup artists occupying every corner. Maria stood stiffly as the team adjusted the gown on her, a long, elegant silver dress adorned with shimmering details. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at her. You look stunning, Clara said, adjusting the hem of the dress. Maria gave a hesitant smile. I don't know. It doesn't feel like me. Clara took her hands gently. You may be wearing something different, but you're still you. Don't forget that, Clara said gently. Maria nodded, taking a deep breath. She needed all the courage she could muster to face the night ahead. As she descended the grand staircase, Arthur stood waiting in the foyer, dressed in an impeccably tailored tuxedo. The moment he saw her, he stilled, his gaze scanning every detail. You look breathtaking, he said, his voice more sincere than formal. Maria felt warmth rise to her cheeks as she glanced away. Thank you. You don't look so bad yourself. Arthur extended his arm, and she took it, hesitantly, feeling as though she were stepping into unfamiliar territory. The ballroom was nothing short of magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a golden glow over tables adorned with exotic flowers and gleaming candelabras. A live orchestra played a soft, elegant melody, filling the space with an air of grandeur. The moment Arthur and Maria entered, all eyes turned toward them. Whispers rippled through the crowd, accompanied by appraising glances and a few barely concealed smirks. Maria's stomach twisted, but she kept her chin high, remembering Arthur's words. They're all staring at me, she whispered, leaning slightly toward him. Let them stare, Arthur replied smoothly. They've got nothing better to do. A faint smile tugged at Maria's lips. She appreciated the support, even if he would never admit he was giving it. The evening began with formal introductions, with Arthur guiding her from one group to another, presenting her as his wife. Some guests were polite, yet distant, while others made no effort to hide their disapproval. Then there was Vanessa Belmont. Tall, blonde, and strikingly beautiful, she carried herself with an effortless elegance laced with entitlement. As soon as she spotted Arthur, she made her way over, a practiced smile on her lips, completely ignoring Maria's presence. "Arthur, darling, it's been too long," Vanessa purred, lightly resting a hand on his arm. Then, as if only just noticing Maria, she tilted her head. "And who is this lovely young lady?" Maria narrowed her eyes, but before she could respond, Arthur smoothly stepped in. "Vanessa, this is my wife, Maria." For a split second, Vanessa's perfectly composed expression faltered. She quickly recovered, offering a polite yet distant handshake. "Of course," she said, her tone overly sweet. "A pleasure to meet you, Maria." "The pleasure is all mine," Maria replied, matching her tone with an equally poised smile. Vanessa studied her, her gaze sharp, assessing her like a predator sizing up its prey. "You know, Maria, it takes a lot of courage to step into this world. Not everyone can handle it." Maria's smile remained, but her eyes gleamed with quiet defiance. "Thank you for the advice. I imagine it must be especially difficult for those who try too hard." Arthur smirked slightly, watching as Vanessa's smile thinned. The night had only just begun, and Maria had already made it clear she wasn't someone to be underestimated. Arthur suppressed a smirk as Vanessa recoiled slightly, clearly unsettled. As the music shifted to a waltz, Arthur turned to Maria and extended his hand. "Shall we dance?" Maria hesitated, glancing around the room. "I'm not very good at this." "Neither am I," he admitted with a playful glint in his eye. "But let's pretend we are." She took his hand, allowing him to lead her to the center of the ballroom. As they moved in sync with the music, Maria realized that, despite the setting and the eyes on her, she felt unexpectedly at ease by Arthur's side. "You're doing well," he murmured, guiding her smoothly across the floor. "Maybe that's because you're not stepping on my feet," she teased. Arthur chuckled, and for a moment, it felt as if they existed in their own world, separate from the judgmental gazes surrounding them. Later that night, as Maria rested at a table, Thomas approached with a smug expression. "So, Maria," he drawled, "how are you enjoying your role as the perfect wife?" Maria crossed her arms and met his gaze without hesitation. "Quite well, thank you, Thomas." Thomas laughed, though there was a sharpness to it. "I have to admit, you're doing better than I expected. But tell me, how long do you think it will last?" Maria felt a flicker of irritation, but kept her composure. "Thomas, what exactly are you trying to prove?" "Me? Nothing," he said, feigning innocence. "I just find it fascinating how Arthur managed to find someone so unconventional." Before Maria could respond, Arthur appeared beside her, placing a firm hand on Thomas's shoulder. "That's enough, Thomas." Thomas shrugged, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, Arthur. Just having a little fun." Arthur didn't move, his gaze unyielding until Thomas backed off with a smirk. Turning to Maria, Arthur sighed. "Sorry about that." "No need to apologize," she replied smoothly. "I can handle people like him." Arthur studied her for a moment, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "I know you can." As they left the gala and drove through the city, Maria turned to Arthur, watching the city lights flicker past. "Why did you really bring me here?" she asked. Arthur didn't hesitate. "Because I wanted them to see who you are." Maria gave a faint smile, but said nothing. For the first time, she felt that Arthur saw her as more than just a pawn in his game. In the days that followed, a subtle change settled over the Montero mansion. Maria and Arthur began to understand each other in ways neither had anticipated. Conversations no longer felt like battles. and the distance between them, once so clearly defined, had begun to blur. Yet, their growing connection also brought new tensions. Maria noticed it in the way Arthur withdrew at times, the nights he stayed in his office longer than usual, the distant look in his eyes at dinner, the way conversations sometimes ended abruptly when they veered too close to personal matters. One morning, while searching for a book in the library, Maria found Arthur sitting at his desk, staring at a framed photo in his hands. He was so lost in thought that he didn't notice her presence until she cleared her throat. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing the uncharacteristic melancholy in his expression. Arthur quickly set the frame back down, his usual guarded demeanor returning. "Yeah, just memories from the past." Maria stepped closer, curious. The photograph showed a couple, clearly his parents, standing beside a young boy, who she assumed was Arthur as a child. The smiles in the picture were warm, full of a happiness that seemed foreign to the man in front of her. "They look happy," she said softly. Arthur sighed, running a hand through his hair. They seemed happy, but the truth is never as simple as a photograph. Maria sat across from him. "Do you want to talk about it?" Arthur hesitated. He wasn't the type to share personal matters, but something about Maria made him feel like he could. "My father was difficult," he finally said, his voice low. He believed the only way to succeed was through absolute control, over business, over people, even over family. Maria heard the edge in his tone. "And your mother?" Arthur exhaled. "She always said family came first, but in practice, she chose my father. She never questioned him, never stood up for us." Maria sat in thoughtful silence. For the first time, she felt like she was seeing Arthur, the real Arthur, beyond the cold, confident mask he wore. "Maybe that's why you're so closed off," she said carefully. Arthur let out a dry laugh. "Closed off is putting it nicely. The truth is, I learned not to trust anyone. It's easier that way." Maria leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "But you don't have to live that way, Arthur. You can be different." He looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to believe her words. But before he could respond, the mansion's doorbell rang, the sound echoing through the halls. It was insistent, almost urgent. Arthur and Maria exchanged a glance before heading toward the entrance. Marcos, Arthur's assistant, was already checking the security monitor. "Sir," he said, his voice unusually tense, "you're going to want to see this." "It's Thomas," Marcos said, his voice tinged with concern. Arthur frowned. "What does he want now?" The door opened, and Thomas strode in with his usual arrogance. But something was different. His posture was more rigid, his expression sharper. There was anger simmering beneath his smirk. "Arthur, we need to talk," Thomas said, ignoring Maria's presence entirely. Arthur folded his arms, unimpressed. "I'm listening." Thomas shot Maria an annoyed glance before rolling his eyes. "In private." "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of her," Arthur replied firmly. Thomas let out a sarcastic laugh. "Oh, so now she's your confidant? Interesting, considering what's at stake." Maria's stomach twisted. "What's going on?" Arthur's expression darkened. "Just say what you came here to say, Thomas." With a dramatic flourish, Thomas pulled a folder from his jacket and dropped it onto the table. "Here it is, proof that your little game went too far." Maria froze. "Game?" Arthur clenched his jaw, his posture tightening as if bracing for impact. He had always known the truth would come out eventually, but not like this. Not so suddenly. Thomas took his time, his tone cruelly casual. "Arthur made a bet with us. He said he could marry someone like you, someone completely outside his world, and keep you by his side for 3 months. It was all just a game to him. You were just a piece on his chessboard." The silence that followed was suffocating. Maria turned to Arthur, waiting, praying for him to deny it, to say it was a lie, but he didn't. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Maria, Arthur started, but the words died in his throat. She took a step back, her breath unsteady. So, all of this was a lie? Every word? Every moment? "It's not that simple," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Maria let out a bitter laugh. "Not simple? You played with my life, Arthur. You used me for some stupid bet." "Maria, please, listen to me," he pleaded, stepping closer. "No," she snapped, stepping back. "I don't want to hear anything else. You're exactly the man I thought you were when I first met you. Cold, selfish, and incapable of caring about anyone but yourself." Satisfied with the chaos he had caused, Thomas smirked and straightened his jacket. "Well, I think my work here is done. Enjoy the rest of your evening." With that, he left, leaving Arthur and Maria alone. Maria took a deep, shaky breath, trying to contain the storm inside her. "I can't stay here, Arthur. Not after this." "Maria, please," he said, his voice raw. "I know I was wrong, but it wasn't just a game. I care about you." She met his eyes, tears streaming down her face. "If you cared, you never would have done this." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked upstairs. Arthur remained frozen in place, watching helplessly as she disappeared. For the first time in his life, he realized he had lost something money couldn't fix. That night, Maria left the mansion, refusing Arthur's offer to drive her. She didn't know where she was going. All she knew was that she had to leave. The pain of his betrayal was too deep to ignore. As the rideshare car took her away, she stared out at the city lights, trying to piece herself back together. Back at the mansion, Arthur remained in his study, staring blankly at the desk, the weight of his mistakes suffocating him. He had spent his life winning, but this time, he had lost something irreplaceable. The following weeks passed in a blur. Maria rented a small room in a modest boarding house on the outskirts of the city, using part of the money Arthur had given her. She began looking for work, determined to rebuild her life from the ground up. But no matter how much she tried to focus on moving forward, the pain of his deception clung to her like a shadow. Meanwhile, the Montero mansion felt emptier than ever. Arthur had grown accustomed to Maria's presence, the warmth she had unknowingly brought into his cold, structured life. Without her, the house felt lifeless. Most nights, he locked himself in his office, staring at the contract that had started it all. What had once seemed like a trivial game now felt like the greatest mistake of his life. One afternoon, Marcos entered the office, holding a piece of paper. His hesitation was uncharacteristic. "Mr. Montero," he said cautiously, "I've managed to locate Maria." Arthur's head snapped up, his heart pounding. He had asked Marcos to find out where she was, but now that he had the answer, he wasn't sure if she would ever want to see him again. "Is she all right?" he asked, his voice quiet. Arthur's voice was softer than he intended. "Is she all right?" Marcos hesitated before answering. "She's working as a waitress at a cafe downtown." Arthur remained silent, absorbing the information. He knew he had to see her, but he also knew he couldn't just show up without something meaningful to say. "Get the car ready," he said at last. Maria was wiping down a table in the small cafe where she had started working when the bell above the door chimed. She didn't look up at first, accustomed to the constant flow of customers. But then, a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. "Maria!" She turned, and there he was, Arthur, standing in the doorway, dressed impeccably as always, but with a hesitant look she had never seen before. "Arthur?" she said, her tone a mixture of surprise and wariness. "What are you doing here?" He stepped forward, but kept a respectful distance. "I needed to talk to you." "There's nothing for us to talk about," she replied, turning back to the table she was cleaning. "Please," he said, his voice almost pleading. "Just give me 5 minutes." Maria stopped and looked at him. There was something different about him, something more subdued, almost humble. Against her better judgment, she nodded. 5 minutes, she said, motioning toward an empty table. Arthur sat while Maria remained standing, her arms crossed. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "and I know what I did was unforgivable." "Then why are you here?" she asked, her tone firm. "Because I realized you deserve so much more than I gave you," he said. "And I want to make things right, if you'll let me." Maria let out a bitter laugh. "Make things right? Arthur, you turned my life into a game. You used me to feed your ego. How exactly do you plan to fix that?" Arthur exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair. "I donated the money from the bet. Every penny. I don't want any of it tied to what happened between us." Maria's eyes widened slightly. "You did that?" "Yes," he said. "But I know that doesn't erase what I did to you. I just want you to know that I regret it. More than anything." She was silent for a moment, processing his words. "And what do you want from me now, Arthur?" "I want a chance to prove I can be different," he said sincerely. "Not as part of a game, but because I care about you." Maria felt her heart tighten. A part of her wanted to believe him, but the fear of being hurt again still lingered. "I need time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Arthur nodded, understanding. "I'll wait as long as it takes." The weeks that followed brought significant changes to both of them. Arthur, once focused solely on his own success, began actively participating in social projects, something Maria had once spoken about at the mansion. But this time, he wasn't just donating money, he was getting directly involved. He visited underserved communities, listened to their stories, and worked on initiatives to provide education and resources. Maria, meanwhile, continued working at the cafe, trying to rebuild her life. But no matter how much she tried, she couldn't shake Arthur from her thoughts. His words at the cafe echoed in her mind, and she began to wonder, had he truly changed? One day, while shopping at the market, Maria ran into Clara, the stylist who had once transformed her for high society events. "Maria, what a surprise!" Clara said warmly, pulling her into a hug. Maria smiled. "Clara, what are you doing here?" "I'm visiting a social project in the neighborhood," Clara replied. "Arthur has been coordinating some incredible initiatives here. He's really committed." Maria was taken aback. She had always known Arthur had the money to support any cause, but she had never imagined him getting personally involved. "Was he here today?" she asked, trying to keep her curiosity hidden. "Yes," Clara said, then gave her a knowing look. "Maria, you should see him. He's not the same man he used to be." Clara's words stayed with Maria as she walked home. Something inside her told her it might be time to hear Arthur out. The next morning, Maria made a decision. She walked up to the Montero mansion, feeling a mixture of nervousness and determination. Stepping through the gate, she saw Arthur in the garden, surrounded by a group of children. They were laughing as he spoke to them, engaged in an educational project he had been working on. He looked different, more at ease, more human. When he noticed her, he froze for a moment before walking toward her, a hesitant but genuine smile on his face. "Maria," he said, his voice unreadable. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." She glanced around before meeting his gaze. "I needed to see for myself," she admitted. "Clara told me about the projects you've been working on." "You were the one who inspired me, Maria," Arthur admitted, stuffing his hands in his pockets. "I realized I had never used my power for anything truly meaningful until I met you." Maria studied him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. "You've really changed, haven't you?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "I'm trying," he said, his voice steady. "And I'll do whatever it takes to prove that to you." Maria took a deep breath, feeling a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying start to lift from her shoulders. "Arthur, I don't know if I can forget what happened," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But maybe I can forgive you." Arthur's eyes lit up with a hope she had never seen in him before. "That's all I could ask for." Their conversation in the garden reignited something between them, but they both knew that rebuilding trust wouldn't happen overnight. There was still a long road ahead, full of uncertainties. After some hesitation, Maria accepted Arthur's invitation to have lunch at the mansion, a small but meaningful step toward regaining some sense of normalcy between them. During lunch, the atmosphere was different. The tension that had once filled the air was now replaced with something else, an unfamiliar ease. Maria, who had once been guarded and defensive, seemed more relaxed. Arthur, on the other hand, showed a side of himself she had never seen before, vulnerable, attentive, and completely present. "I saw the children in the garden," Maria said, breaking the silence. "You're really involved in these projects, aren't you?" Arthur nodded, setting his napkin beside his plate. "Yes, for the first time. Using my money for something meaningful makes me feel..." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "It makes me feel like I'm doing something real." Maria tilted her head, intrigued. "And you think you owe that to me?" "Yes," Arthur replied, offering her a small, sincere smile. "You made me realize how disconnected I was from reality. Your stories, your strength, they made me question who I was and what I was doing with my life." Maria felt a tightness in her chest. His words sounded genuine, but the fear of trusting again still lingered. "Arthur," she began carefully, choosing her words, "it's not enough to just say you've changed. Actions are what truly matter." "I know," he said, without hesitation. "That's why I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you that I'm a different man." In the days that followed, Maria found herself accompanying Arthur to his social projects. He invited her to visit a community school that was being renovated with the funds he had donated. At first, she hesitated, unsure if he was serious about his commitment. But eventually, curiosity got the better of her, and she agreed. When they arrived, Arthur was greeted warmly by the children and volunteers. To Maria's surprise, he wasn't just there for appearances. He was genuinely engaged, listening to their stories and asking questions about the challenges they faced. She watched him closely, waiting for any sign that this was just another performance. But as the day went on, she realized something unexpected. Arthur was truly enjoying himself. "You're doing well," Maria said, as she observed him discussing the school's needs with one of the teachers. Arthur turned to her, his expression calm yet content. "I didn't realize how much this would mean to me," he admitted. "I never thought helping others could be so rewarding." Maria smiled back, feeling something shift between them. For the first time, she began to believe that Arthur's change was real. Despite their progress, there was still more to be done. But one thing was certain: Arthur Montero was no longer the same man he had been before. And Maria was no longer sure she wanted to keep him at a distance. Maria still needed time to process everything that had happened. She decided it would be best to maintain some distance while she sorted through her feelings. "I need to get back to the cafe," she said, one morning over breakfast at the mansion. Arthur frowned, clearly disappointed, but he respected her decision. "If that's what you need, I understand." "Thank you," Maria said softly. "But that doesn't mean I don't see what you're doing. I just need a little more time." Arthur nodded, knowing he couldn't rush things. "I'll wait, Maria, as long as it takes." As Maria returned to her routine at the cafe, Arthur continued dedicating himself to his projects. He spent hours in meetings with non-profit organizations, community leaders, and volunteers. trying to make up for the years he had spent ignoring the world around him. During one of these meetings, Clara, who had also become involved in the initiatives, approached him with a knowing smile. "You've changed, Arthur," she said. "Maria would be proud of what you're doing." Arthur offered a modest smile. "I just hope she sees it one day." Clara placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "She already does, but trust her timing. Maria isn't someone who's easily swayed by words alone. You're showing her you're capable of more." Arthur nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. One afternoon, while Maria was serving customers at the cafe, she heard a burst of laughter outside. A group of children came running in, followed closely by Arthur. He was dressed casually, something rare for him, and carried a bag full of books. Maria approached, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" "I promised to bring books for the kids," he explained, motioning toward the children who were already flipping through them excitedly. "And they insisted on coming with me." Maria let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "You really have changed, haven't you?" "I'm trying," he said sincerely, "and I hope you can see that." Maria studied him for a long moment, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. She knew she was beginning to trust him again, but the fear of getting hurt still lingered. That evening, as Maria closed up the cafe, she noticed an envelope resting on the counter. Curious, she picked it up and opened it, revealing a handwritten letter. "Maria, I know words can't undo what I've done, but I hope they can at least show you how much you've changed my life. Before I met you, I lived in a hollow world, surrounded by things that never truly meant anything. You showed me that there's more to life than money and power, and for that, I will always be grateful. I know that regaining your trust will take time, but I'm willing to wait, not because it's part of a game or a challenge, but because you're the only person who's ever made me want to be a better man. With affection, Arthur." Tears welled in Maria's eyes as she read his words. She knew there was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she could give him a second chance. The sun shone brightly that morning as Maria set the cafe tables, her mind drifting back to the changes in her life since leaving the Montero mansion. It had been 3 months. She had rebuilt parts of her life, regained her independence, and yet, something still felt incomplete. Then, the doorbell rang. Looking up, she saw Arthur standing there. He was dressed simply, without the usual air of polished perfection, his expression a mix of nervousness and hope. "Arthur," she said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" Arthur took a hesitant step forward, his expression unusually vulnerable. "I needed to see you, Maria. I have something I can't keep inside anymore," he admitted. Maria crossed her arms, trying to maintain the emotional distance she had worked so hard to build. "I think we've said everything there was to say, don't you?" "Maybe," he replied, his gaze locked on hers. "But I couldn't let you walk out of my life without trying again, without telling you how much you changed who I am." Maria took a deep breath, setting down the cloth she had been holding on the counter. "And what exactly do you want from me now, Arthur? Another chance to prove you can win at anything?" "No," he said quickly, shaking his head. "I never want to hurt you again, Maria. I just want you to know that the man you met under that ridiculous contract, he's gone. You showed me that life is about so much more than power and money. I'm here because I want to be a man worthy of you." Her heart pounded, but she kept her composure. His words sounded sincere, but the wounds of betrayal weren't fully healed. "Have you really changed, Arthur?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying," he answered with conviction, "and all I want is a chance to show you, not with words, but with actions." Maria remained silent, searching his eyes for honesty. Finally, she said, "Change takes time, Arthur. So does forgiveness." "I know," he replied with a faint smile. and I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." In the weeks that followed, Arthur and Maria found themselves spending more time together. He took her to visit the social projects he had started, while she invited him into her world at the cafe. Slowly, Maria began to notice that the man beside her now was different from the one she had met months ago. One day, Arthur invited her to a charity event in an underserved neighborhood where he had been working. Curious to see how he behaved in that setting, Maria accepted. During the event, Arthur spoke about the improvements being made in the community. As he talked, his gaze found Maria in the audience, and he smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. After his speech, he approached her and extended his hand. "Come with me, I want to show you something." Arthur led her back to the mansion, specifically to the garden, the place where so many of their most important conversations had taken place. But this time, it was different. The garden was transformed. Strings of lights hung from the trees, casting a soft glow. A pathway lined with flower petals led to an arch decorated with white and red roses. Under the arch, a small table was set, with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses waiting for them. Maria stood speechless, taking in the scene. "Arthur, what is this?" "Something I needed to do," he said, guiding her down the path. When they reached the arch, Arthur took her hands in his, holding them firmly. "Maria, you've changed my life in ways I never imagined. Before you, I was lost, obsessed with control and success. But you showed me what truly matters: people, connection, love." Maria's eyes welled with tears, but she let him continue. "I know our beginning was wrong, and I can't change the past," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I can promise you a better future, if you'll let me." Arthur released her hands for a moment and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Slowly, he knelt before her, looking up with an expression of vulnerability Maria had never seen before. "Maria," he began, his voice trembling, "I don't want you to be my wife because of a contract or a bet. I want you to be my wife because I love you. I want to build a life with you, one based on respect, trust, and real love." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me? For real this time?" Maria covered her mouth, tears streaming freely down her face. Her heart was torn between the pain of the past and the hope of a future. But as she looked at Arthur, she saw it: sincerity, regret, and love. "Yes, Arthur," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I accept." Arthur's face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He stood and pulled her into a tight embrace, and they remained there, under the lights and floral arch, as if the rest of the world had faded away. 2 months later, the ceremony took place in the same garden. This time, the setting was even more breathtaking, adorned with fresh flowers and candles that created a magical atmosphere. Maria wore a white dress with delicate embroidery, her hair styled in an elegant bun woven with small white flowers. Arthur, in a classic black suit, stood at the altar, his eyes shining with emotion as Maria walked toward him. Each step she took carried the promise of a new beginning. Their guests, friends, volunteers, and the people who had become a meaningful part of their journey watched in silent admiration as the two stood face to face. During the vows, Arthur took Maria's hands in his. "Maria, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me," he said, his voice steady yet full of emotion. "I promise to love you, respect you, and stand by your side through every moment, good or bad. Thank you for giving me the chance to become a better man." Tears welled in Maria's eyes as she responded. "Arthur, you've shown me that people can change, and that true love requires courage. I promise to walk by your side, always, as we build our life together." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, they kissed as the crowd erupted into warm applause, tossing flower petals into the air. The reception was filled with music, laughter, and dancing. Arthur and Maria, hand in hand, cherished every moment, knowing they had overcome the past and were finally ready to build their future together. What do you think? Did Maria make the right decision by forgiving Arthur and choosing to marry him? Share your opinion in the comments below. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and check out more emotional stories by clicking on the end screen.